For today's episode, Massive Epic Tiny Battles, we are standing on the deck of an actual World War II cruiser. Today, we are refighting the Second Battle of Guadalcanal. After the First Battle of Guadalcanal, the Allied forces which had attempted to prevent Japanese reinforcements from reaching the island was in no fit state to fight, and they headed for Espiritu Santo. The Japanese force had also suffered losses, of which the worst was the battleship Hiei. However, the way was now open for the Japanese supply convoy to push through. As the Japanese convoy continued its slow progress towards Guadalcanal, additional forces were sent to support it, including the battleship Kiyomisha and several heavy cruisers. Some of these bombarded Henderson Field, whilst other vessels took up station to protect the convoy against surface attack. After the First Battle of Guadalcanal, Allied resources were now virtually non-existent. The only significant force available was the escort of the USS Enterprise. The escort was built around the battleships USS Washington and South Dakota. The destroyers, these ships were ordered into the slot to intercept the Japanese force. Although the Allied force looked formidable on paper, it was hastily thrown together and had not exercised as a unit. Nor had the Japanese vessels operated as a single unit. They were pulled together from different formations, some of which had fought at the previous Battle of Guadalcanal. 2 battleships and 4 destroyers versus 1 battleship, 2 heavy and 2 light cruisers, plus 9 destroyers was a mismatch in terms of force, but it could still go either way. Whoever won the coming battle would gain control of the waters around Guadalcanal and ultimately come to dominate the island. The Japanese force was dispersed to cover all avenues of approach. As a result, the Allied force was spotted around 2300 hours on the 14th of November 1942. The U.S. vessels had picked up nearby Japanese ships a few minutes earlier. Today, we will be replaying this battle. In their opening moves, the Japanese tried to group their left flank forces together in an attempt to circle around the rear of the American battleships. The Americans take advantage of the divided enemy and move their destroyers into close quarters fighting. With the support of the American battleships, the left flank of the Japanese starts to feel the pressure. The first salvo of the USS Washington brings the lead cruiser to the brink. As the destroyers close the gap, the small cruiser proves to be nothing more than target practice for the oncoming American wave. The destroyers come to within a short distance from each other, and the lead Japanese destroyer, Shikanami, becomes disabled with a single hull point left. The Japanese, in a desperate effort to do some good with this outgunned force, launch their torpedoes early in an attempt to gain an edge over the Americans. For the rules today, we are using Victory at Sea, and when a torpedo hits, one has to see if it was a dud. And in this case, one of the many torpedoes blows up and destroys the USS Gwen. The right flank of the Japanese push up and slowly make their way towards the action, at a steady pace so as all the ships stay in formation. Alas, they did not arrive in time to help out their destroyers. The Japanese light cruiser Sendai sinks with a second salvo from the USS Washington. The American destroyers launched their own torpedoes, sinking the Japanese destroyer. The Japanese try to disengage and retreat off the south edge of the table, but to no avail. The American destroyers use their initiative to close the distance even more and manage to box in and decimate a second Japanese destroyer. The US battleships now prepare to receive the front of the Japanese battle line. They use their radar and are able to illuminate the lead elements for their gunners to target. This battle takes place at nighttime, and one must spot the enemy before firing. Ships with radar have a major advantage. The first salvo from the USS South Dakota hits the magazine of the lead Japanese cruiser, and a massive internal explosion occurs. As a result, the Nagara is destroyed in a fiery blaze. The Americans plan to use Salvo Island in the middle of the board to their advantage. They call back their destroyers and attempt to circle around the island so they never have to face the entire enemy at once. The Japanese see this and split their force into two. One heads to the north of the island, while the other charges south right into the rear American battleship. Just when it seems to be game over for the Japanese, an unbelievable disaster strikes for the US Navy. The American battleships fail to spot the Japanese destroyers and cannot synchronize their fire onto the same cruiser. The Japanese decisively win the initiative just as their destroyers come into torpedo range of those battleships. The USS South Dakota has taken a number of torpedo hits, and although having a torpedo belt to soak up most of the damage, the rolls generate quite a number of critical hits. Its magazine explodes, followed by multiple internal explosions. It suffers massive amounts of damage. To make matters worse, one of the torpedoes hits the engine, and the South Dakota comes to a full stop. The Japanese cruisers try their best to capitalize on the sitting duck, but are unable to do so as one of the special rules for this scenario, their main guns have been loaded with high explosives for offshore bombardment. The USS South Dakota manages to repair its engine, but due to an over-aggressive fix, its electrical systems fail all over the ship. The once mighty battleship is now an oversized tugboat. As the rest of the US fleet makes its way north of the island, the Japanese destroyer squadrons beat them to the top. Winning the initiative again, they position their 3 destroyers around the Washington. With another deadly torpedo attack at such a close range, the second battleship becomes disabled. And our game ends. While neither battleship was sunk and all the torpedoes expended, the battleships may live to fight another day, but that day would not come for quite some time. For now, it is an overwhelming victory for the Japanese Navy. One which, had occurred historically, could have meant the Japanese dominance in the South Pacific and the complete recapture of Guadalcanal. Thank you for watching our video today.